Doing it live.
All right. Push the button, I swear it. There it is. Hello, everybody. This is Dale Maxwell. This is Kickassery. What do we do here at Kickassery? We talk to kick-ass people. Just like, what am I doing? Sorry, I've got something else in my ear. Just like this gentleman right here, Chris. I am so excited. I'm so thankful. Chris Spear is the owner of Perfect Little Bites, personal chef service. He's the founder, podcast host of Chefs Without a Restaurant.
Sorry, wearing the hat. Wearing the hat. Perfect Little Bites, the Chefs Out Restaurants shirt.
Dude, merch it up, man. Merch it up. I love it. Chris, how the heck have you been? It's been years since I talked to you, and I'm going to apologize right now that it's been years.
No apology needed. No apology needed. Yeah, we were just talking about the fact that I think the first time I was a guest on a podcast, you were either number one or number two. But, you know, I've had my podcast 4 years, so it was at least 5 years that we were on the podcast. But, you know, we shoot comments back and forth on TikTok these days. That's how the kids roll. So it's good enough for me.
Us old kids, us old hat kids.
That's right. I can show these kids some tricks.
Yeah, there you go. That's sus, bro. So in this amount of time, you've started a whole podcast, and you just told me how many episodes are you at now?
This week will be episode 205, I believe. That's in less than 4 years. I started in November 2019, so that's more than one a week on average.
Okay, so let's roll that back for a second, and let's just jump face first into this.
Sure.
So what made you, because I want to talk about Perfect Little Bites as well, but what made you go from a personal at-home chef to running a multi-year podcast?
Sure. Well, Chefs Without Restaurants was a community first. So, you know, I'll kind of breeze through some of this and then we can dig in. I have a personal chef business. I started it on the side 12 years ago now, and this year will be year 6 of me doing it full time. And then I think, you know, once you get some success at something, people want to know how you did it. So I have a lot of people, can I buy you coffee? Can I buy you a beer? I would love to pick your brain. You know, can you help me? I want to leave my restaurant job and become a personal chef. And that's cool. I love doing that. I did that a lot, but it's not a great use of my time. It's not scalable. And I thought, like, with the internet, why are we not doing this online? We should have a Facebook group or something, a community. I'm no guru. I'm no master. I don't want to be the only one giving advice. So you can come into, if we had a Facebook group, and say, what are some ways to start a personal chef business? And I can give my 2 cents, but you could have, you know, half a dozen other people give their 2 cents. And I went to a dinner, you know, 6-7 years ago, and it was loosely called Chefs Without Restaurants. It was a bunch of chefs who either didn't work in restaurants or they were in between projects, and they did this collaborative dinner, and it was loosely just called Chefs Without Restaurants. And I love the idea of that because that was me. I've never worked in a restaurant. I'm 30 years in the food industry and I've never worked in a restaurant. I've done, you know, catering, research development, worked at IKEA, worked at retirement communities. So I was like, yeah, that's me. And that's my friends who have food trucks. And that's, you know, my friends who are caterers. So that was the name. And it started as this online community. And I was doing, one of the things about the community is, because most of us are solopreneurs, we don't have employees, but sometimes we need help. So, you know, I wanted to have a place where we could do that as well. So, you know, I was doing a dinner one night. I posted and said, hey, I have, you know, it's like a 15-person dinner. I can't do it by myself. Who wants to help? My friend Andrew, who owns Pizza Llama here in Frederick. It's a wood-fired mobile pizza operation. And I've known Andy for a number of years. He wanted to do it. And we were driving back from the event and he said, why isn't this a podcast? I'm like, because I'm not a podcast, you know, like at the time, I'm like, I don't know any of this. I'm barely figuring out how to be a chef entrepreneur with all that stuff. Like, I don't know podcasting. And he said, well, it can't be that hard. Like, we can, you know, watch some YouTube videos. We'll figure it out together. I'll do it with you. So I actually had a co-host at first. I wasn't even really the host. For the most part, Andrew was reaching out to the people that he wanted to talk to. There were more people he knew. I was more the tech side, figured out the editing and so forth. And we started November 2019, as you know, what was coming up on the hill there, you know, as we get into early 2020, COVID hit. and Andrew had to dip out. He had a business was down. He had to let some people go and basically do everything himself. We were also doing all the podcasts in person. And I said, listen, I'm underemployed or unemployed right now. I'm just going to do this thing, and I'm going to figure out how to do it remote. My mother-in-law is doing her church on the internet. I'm sure I can interview people on the internet. So we made the shift in a very quick matter of, 3 or 4 months to it being a duo to just me. And I haven't looked back. I just pressed forward and figured out how to get better and better at doing this. So, from November 2019 to now, I've got 204 episodes under my belt.
I remember watching your first episodes, and you guys were sitting on couches, and
Most definitely.
the lighting was fabulous, and
Yeah.
I mean, it was the start.
I've never wanted it to be a video first, and now everyone wants you to have video. What I'm going to do these days is like what we're doing is, I could download the video and put the clips of us from the screen, because I'm still only doing it virtually. But at the time, yes, we went into Baltimore one day. We interviewed some people in a place there. We had a brewery, Jug Bridge Brewery in Frederick. Matt, who was the owner at the time, was very great about letting us use that space. The acoustics were terrible. I actually rather do it at home because I'm in a carpeted room. I've got some, you can't see it, but like padding all around me. The audio is so much better. But we were in, a very loud cement brick room, and he was closed that day, but he'd be getting deliveries at the brewery. So you'd hear like the beep, beep, beep of like the trucks backing up, bringing his grain and stuff. But it was what it was. It was like 3 people chilling around a table, drinking beer, maybe too much beer at some point. Just, chewing the fat. And that was fun. I liked that too. But I started to get a vision for what I wanted this to be. Like I had my sights, not that it's, not that we didn't have great guests, not that I'm not appreciative of talking to local food truck operators here in Frederick, but I thought, once we went online and took this, I could talk to literally anyone in the world. And I have a list of hundreds of people that I want to have on the show. And I set my sights on that.
And speaking of setting your sights, starting in those, we all start humbly. I started this on my cell phone. I set my cell phone on a desk, and that's how this started in a way. Can you share with who's the next episode on your show?
That's I hate to say it's in like 3 days and I haven't figured that out yet. I have to listen to a couple and see what I can do. I think it's going to be this woman who has her big thing. She's in Maryland, and she loves digging into Maryland traditional recipes. Like she collects all those community cookbooks. She goes to all those secondhand bookstores and gets all of them and wants to find, the Westminster Church community cookbook, and really digging into the history of like, well, like what were people eating and cooking 200 years ago on the Eastern Shore? What does a traditional, Christmas dinner look like in Baltimore? And she spent a lot of time doing that. And she actually has her second cookbook coming out this fall, winter, based on Maryland holidays. And for me, I'm not from Maryland, so I love this stuff because I want to learn more about, traditional foodways. So her name's Kara Mae Harris, and I think Kara's episode will probably be this week, if not the next week.
So, okay, I want to point this out, brother. So you're talking about a local gal there in Maryland that's been collecting Maryland recipes and talking about traditional Maryland stuff. So we're talking very, very home cooking.
Yes.
And then the guest that you just aired, look at the contrast.
Yeah, very different.
Who did you just air?
So I just had Tiffany Thiessen. People maybe know her as Tiffany Amber Thiessen. We'll say, if you're a fan of Saved by the Bell or Beverly Hills 90210, you probably know her. She also has 2 cookbooks. Her second cookbook is out tomorrow. So, I had the opportunity to talk to her. It was really interesting because going into it, I actually worked with her PR team. Due to the SAG strike, we were not allowed to reference any Hollywood anything past, present, or future. So that's where you really have to get into some interesting conversation points. So I'm having her on mostly because of the fact that she's a famous Hollywood actress, yet we cannot talk about anything she has done. I cannot talk about the shows she has been on. So you have to get into some creative writing, if you will, with your questions and so forth. Now, I was told I could, obviously put it into the intro and everything. She's just not allowed to talk about. She can't get on there and say, well, I loved working on Saved by the Bell. And no, like there's none of that. The whole SAG
Right.
strike covered all that. So it was really interesting for me. And it gave me a chance to, have some fun with it. One of the, I lead off by saying, obviously you've been in the spotlight for a number of years. Most of our listeners will know you from, and then there's a big pause. I say, being a cookbook author and a famous chef, right? Kind of like nudge, nudge, wink, wink. Because like you had to kind of find a way to dance around it. Obviously everyone who's listening is going to know who she is, but we couldn't talk about that on air. And, that's just the hand you're dealt and you figure it out.
Did that did that make it more personal? I mean, yes, of course, you have a celebrity, you want to talk about that
Yeah.
celebrity
Yeah.
aspect of it, but did it, in listening to you and thinking about it, did that, I wonder what, okay, how am I trying to ask this? Did that make it easier to talk about the cooking?
Yeah, because we're talking more about, it's a book about cooking leftovers or using them in creative ways, mostly in your home. So then that leads more to talking about family, kids, what it's like cooking with children, cooking for your husband, having picky eaters in your homes, things that are relatable for both me and probably my listener. I don't think I have many listeners who are celebrities who identify with that. So, and we made some jokes about her being, just like us. She
Right.
is very down to earth. And she said on the show, we don't have nannies, we don't have help. She did a TikTok video about, using leftover hot dogs. And I kind of joked and said, yeah, look at Tiffany Thiessen, she's using leftover hot dogs as well. She's just like us,
Right.
because for her, sustainability was really important. And that's one of the reasons she wrote this book. And I think it's good for someone like her to show that she's not just this, celebrity with millions of dollars who can afford to throw stuff in the garbage can. So, it's really interesting because there's a craft to doing this well. There's a million podcasts out there and there's more every day. And I did not come up in the media industry. I didn't know how to interview. I used to do it on the fly, and now it's really crafting my show, writing questions. On my screen right here is a Word document with the questions that I have, so I can make eye contact with you via the camera. But I'm also looking at questions and keeping it going, and being aware of I was going to ask you this seventh, and you just brought it up second, and now in my mind I'm kind of like reshuffling the order of the show and how it goes. And it's interesting. It's a whole new skill set, but figuring out how to be a better conversationalist, a better interviewer, and helping you facilitate the telling of your story, right? And asking you questions that not everyone asks, because especially with a celebrity like that, quite often their PR person sends you a bunch of softball questions. Make sure you ask about this, ask about that. But I know you're going to go on 24 other shows in the next month. And I don't want this to just be another stop. I'm going to ask you questions. And I asked her a stumper. I said, you're a celebrity. People are going to buy this because you're a celebrity. It's a celebrity cookbook. So who would you like to see write a cookbook? Any celebrity out there. If they wrote a book, you would buy it just based on the fact they're a celebrity. And it threw her because no one's asking her that question on this, book tour. And that's kind of what I want to do. And I try and do that with all my guests.
I love it. That's amazing. And how did you just as a fellow show producer, provider, how did you get to the level of being able to get that caliber onto your show?
Working with
Not
PR,
dismissing
working with PR agents. So like I've told a number of people this, my best guests have come through PR representation. The way it starts is like, once the show gets some traction, you start charting, my show charts pretty high in food and beverage in the United States. People take notice, and then you'll get some person maybe you've never heard about, but they've got a cookbook, and it comes through an agent rep, reaches out to you and says, hey, I've got, Joe Schmo, they've got a book coming out. Would you like to have them on the show? And you just start working with them and you build up a relationship. And then, I reach out and say, like, for cookbooks, most of it comes through cookbooks, right? Okay. So there's 2 seasons for cookbooks, and the big one is fall. Cookbooks start the last week in August and they go to like the second week in November. And it's going to be everyone and their mother writing a cookbook. And you just reach out to those PR people a couple weeks ahead, middle of August, and say, hey, I know it's cookbook season. I know you have people who've got books. You want to get them on the show. I'd love to have them. Who do you have? And they will respond to you and send you 20 digital copies, advanced copies of the books, and say, here you go. Let me know who you want on the show. And that's happened the past 3 years now around cookbook season. So Tiffany's representation, I also had Nick DiGiovanni on the show, same representation. He has 10 million subscribers on his YouTube channel. He was on MasterChef. He's cooked with Gordon Ramsay. And then I just had Brad Leone, who used to be the R&D chef at the Bon Appetit Test Kitchen. Same thing. So they're all coming from the same agency. And, once I did Nick's episode, it went well. They really liked it. They were happy with my work. They fed me Brad. It was like 3 days later. They're like, we love Nick's episode. Brad's got this new YouTube show. We want to get him on. Can you make it work? But he only has like a day to do it. Could you talk to him tomorrow? And I just had to open my calendar and say, sure, I want to work with it. They picked up the phone and called me at 9 p.m. the day before and said, is there any way you could talk to Brad tomorrow? Yep,
Wow.
I'll pull it together. I want to be the guy who can make it happen. And then, that leads to Tiffany. But, their agency represents Selena Gomez, Matthew McConaughey's wife, who has a cook, like all these big name celebrities. So
right.
I now have an in with this PR agency that has been sending me amazing guests, and I want to keep that up. And I work with about 4 agents. So I have my list of people who I want to talk to, people who aren't, famous, who maybe don't have representation. That's a lot of me reaching out to them via Instagram DMs, emails, whatever. But it's nice to just kind of kick back and have a couple people send me an email and say, here's what I got. And, no hard feelings if it's not your thing. I get tons of them where it's just like, I don't know. I'm not interested. It's not the right time, maybe next time, but keep sending me people you have, and they'll do that. And they'll send you free books. I mean, I have dozens of free, amazing cookbooks, not only digital, but they'll send me physical copies, and I get them months in advance, which is really cool.
So, I mean, and I'm sure people have asked you this question all the time, but sitting in that brewery, listening to that backup beeper while the wheat and barley is being delivered to that brewery, did you see yourself here at that time?
No, I didn't. I had no idea where it was going. And it was shortly thereafter that I actually took a podcasting course. A guy blind reached out to me, sent me an email, and he said, I'm putting together a course. You'll be one of the first people to do it. I have my own podcast, so I know what I'm talking about. Would love you to get in on the ground floor. And I paid, I think it was like $1,700 to take this course, which he's now charging $8,000+ to people to do. So I got in on the ground floor. It's called Grow the Show. Maybe Kevin doesn't want me talking about how cheap it was back then. But it was great, and there was a cohort of us, and you had, weekly Zoom meetings where we could ask questions and you could review each other's episodes, and you covered everything from where to get intro music to how to get sponsors and what to charge. And they gave you template emails and template contracts. So when I have a sponsor, I could send it to people and it has the legalese done and all that. And that really helped. And that was at about the point where I was really starting to grow. The show was my own. I was working on the quality, and it really took it to the next level.
So is this your main gig now?
No, the cooking, I mean, it's still not generating enough revenue for me. I mean, there's podcast sponsorship, people from hundreds of dollars to thousands of dollars. But when I say thousand, like someone might pay you, $1,500 a month to do ad reads, which is good money. But if you only had one of those, that comes to like $15,000 a year. It's not quit your job money yet.
Right.
But I was thinking, if I had 3 of those a month, then you're like 5,000 a month. That's like 60,000. Like, that's not that bad, I really enjoy cooking. I would love to get to a point where I could just go out 1 or 2 days a week and cook. Big parties, fun parties, kind of the ones that I want to do, not have to do all the other ones, and then just really focus on this. I want to do more speaking. I go to a lot of conferences, and I think now that I've kind of cut my teeth at this, I go to conferences and I see these panels, and sometimes I see these interviews, and I don't think they're that great. And think I could
Then
do this,
it.
You go. So I'm working on some proposals right now for them because I really like to research my guests. And I think sometimes you go and you see these things. It's like, I don't think the person interviewing them knows a single thing about these people. And they're not asking the questions that I would ask,
right.
So could I ask those questions? So I'm in the process of putting together 2 potential different pitches to, kind of pitch when there's food conferences to see, and then bring my friends, people I want to talk to. I don't want to necessarily do strangers. I want to do a panel on Chefs Who Podcast, and I have a lot of those friends, and let's bring 3 of them and pay for us to all fly out somewhere cool and talk about Chefs Who Podcast.
I love it. I love it. Chris, I absolutely love watching your journey, even though I've been kind of watching from afar. It's been absolutely Oh man, almost envious of how you've stuck to it, ground it out, worked it out, educated yourself, pushed yourself through. Um, a handful of years ago, a couple years ago, you and I had, I think it was just some email or whatnot back and forth. And I was like, "Hey, how you doing? What's going on?" And you're like, "Yeah, I'm actually starting to get paid. I'm a little bit of this is coming in, a little
Yeah.
bit of that's coming in." I'm like, "No freaking way. That's amazing." And um, I mean, you've been in okay, you have celebrities on your show now. You've
Yep.
been in 2 books,
Mhm.
one not necessarily a cookbook, but it was still super cool.
Yeah, I mean, one was a book about chefs with tattoos, which was amazing, and it was written by, this guy who was the editor of BuzzFeed Books at the time, and the illustrator is a really well-known illustrator. She has tons of books. That was cool, and it was kind of like a cookbook because they asked me to submit a recipe. I actually went through and counted. I had 4 pages in that book, which is more than anyone else in that book. It's really cool. So I got a 4-page spread. It's called Knives and Ink. Yeah, and then I was in another book. My friend Emmanuel LaRoche has a podcast where he interviews people in the food industry, and he wanted to put together a book, kind of a, almost like a, not quite a transcript of his interviews, but it was like the first 50 conversations he had and kind of the wisdom from those chefs. And he put that book out last year. And I'm included in that because at the time I was the only private personal chef. It was funny. I reached out to him and he was only talking to like really well-known restaurant chefs. I'm like, you haven't done anything on a personal chef. Like I am a totally other end of the spectrum. I would love to talk to you. And I, worked my way onto his show and then it ended up in a book. So yeah.
So, as you're talking, I'm remembering back because I love trying to remember where I meet people.
Chamber of Commerce. I feel like it was at the business card exchange at Canapes. I could be wrong about which one it was.
I don't it might have been that one, but yes, good memory. Yes.
That's the only place I would have known you from. It was the Chamber of Commerce for sure. Frederick Chamber of
Yeah.
Commerce.
And shook hands, and I think I invited you to a networking event.
Probably. Yeah.
And
I was
then
networking super hard. I mean, at that time, I don't even know if I had gone full time with my business yet. I mean, I was really
no.
side hustling for quite a while. And I joined the chamber as one of my first, like, how do I get my name out there kind of things. So it was November of 2016 when I left my job to go full time. So, but I probably joined the chamber in 2013, 14. It's been a good number of years just really, hustling with networking. Like, how do I meet people? How do I get leads? And I think it was in that time when I probably met you.
And we sat down shortly after and BS'd, and because I was like, "What do you do and how do you do it?" And even at that time, you were just such a wealth of knowledge, and your passion came through. And I remember you telling the story of working at IKEA and going through that process, and how you came up as a non-traditional chef.
Yeah.
Because most chefs, let's be honest, they start as a boy, or they go to culinary school and they work their face off for a decade and they get their teeth kicked in for a long time. And then you eventually finally maybe get to somewhere in the
100%.
traditional restaurant. A good buddy of mine who's also one of the ass kickers here, Raymond, he did that. He came up that way. And it's funny because he tries to convince kids not to be a chef every day.
I was doing a dinner this weekend and someone said that their 4-year-old was really excited that I was cooking for them because he wants to be a chef. And I told his mom, don't do it. Don't do it. No, but but one of the things about my show and my community is there's so many cool different things. When I was in culinary school, I graduated in 1998 and the world was drastically different. These jobs kind of existed, but you thought you were going to leave and be an executive chef at a high-end restaurant or a
Yep.
resort or something like that. We were not talking about research and development. We were not talking about working for contract food service, cooking in retirement communities, schools, business dining. We weren't talking about cookbook writing or any of that. It was just assumed that you went to culinary school, you got a degree, and you're going to be like a chef at a really nice restaurant, hotel, or resort. And now there's a million things you could do. And that's why on my show, I also wanted to have those people and highlight that, especially for the young kids out there and see like they could, oh, wow, I didn't even realize you could do that in the food world.
Right.
Like, let's get some really interesting people doing some cool stuff and have them on the show.
Okay. Speaking of young kids, you were telling me who snapped this photo.
Yeah, that's my daughter, Abby, who at the time was 10 years old. She took that photo. Um, we rented an Airbnb. I really wanted to get some new videos for my website. And I have a friend who has an Airbnb in Iamsville, the Fingboard Inn, which is a great place. And I said to Dawn, hey, can I come shoot some photos and video there? But, I needed a set of hands because in this day and age of social media, I do a lot of cooking at home. I post videos and it's just the shots of the food, but I really wanted shots of me in there. And I knew I was going to need someone to do that. And my daughter loves art and that kind of stuff. And I talked her through it. So we brought the big studio lights and everything into this place. And we storyboarded the whole thing. And I had 7 dishes I was going to do. And we had a list of all the shots we needed. And I just gave her my iPhone. I mean, it's amazing. iPhone 14 Pro Max. I shoot in, 4K and you get some amazing shots. And I just gave her the phone and said, shoot the whole thing. I'm just going to be cooking and shoot the whole thing. And we're going to get a bunch of video, hopefully, and a bunch of, still photos we can use. So Abby took that photo and I paid her $50 for that. This one's a selfie. I took this one myself. It's nice to take photos when you're in someone's home and show the world that you're actually cooking.
So I absolutely adore that you brought your daughter in to do that and to help you with the success of your business and to grow that, and to teach her and to give her a skill set that you're developing yourself.
Yeah, well, I love this stuff. And, the kids, they're so tech savvy, tech first, I've already paid for the good apps on my phone, which means I can install them on their phones since we all have iPhones. And I wanted the kids, so they've been playing with it for a couple of years now, and they've had Photoshop and Lightroom on their phones and Filmic Pro and all these things that I use. So they're already making, yesterday they were making a video of a obstacle course with puppets. Like they bought puppets at the Frederick Fair and they wanted to make like this stop motion video on it, which, basically is the same thing you'd see as like a TikTok or an Instagram reel these days. And they're learning how to do that and find the music on there and set it to that. So, I have twins, they're 11 years old and this is the world they're growing up in, and, kind of lean into it and show them the good things that come about it. I mean, they see me using it all the time between the podcast and the social media stuff, and show them the good sides of the internet and the things that can come from it.
I love that. I love that attitude. Absolutely love that attitude. So, I actually had somebody just today ask about a project that my daughter and I did 2 years ago, 3 years ago. And I don't know if you saw it or not. It was called the Maddie Daddy Show.
No, I didn't see that.
So it was literally just Madison, my daughter, who's now 11 as well. And we just did kitchen stuff. Like we did, we baked cake and we cooked different things. And of course, not to your scale for sure, but it was just home cooking stuff. It was just home stuff.
That's the good stuff though.
And then we did, we'd send mom out. So we'd send my wife out. And we'd say, okay, we want to do a drink challenge. And she would go out and buy the most abstract, wacky crap you could find. And then we would do blind taste tests, right? And I found out I absolutely despise kombucha from that.
Oh, that's my drink. I wish it wasn't my drink because it's so expensive. It's like $3 to $4 a bottle. I love it.
Maybe it was the stuff we got, but I was like,
I like sour stuff. It's really sour.
Not my game. Not my game.
That's my jam.
We did fruits, so we got exposed to dragon fruit and star fruit and, all that kind of stuff, whatever we could find at the local grocery store. So what you're doing is you're taking it to that next level. But somebody just asked, they're like, when are you going to do Maddie Daddy Show again? I'm like, maybe we should. Because you're absolutely right. And the whole reason I bring that up is you're absolutely right, is teaching our children the positive side of social, the positive side of these things.
I built my business on the internet. I wouldn't have been able to build a business without it. Like when you look at, there's a lot of talk about gatekeepers, right? Like back in the day, you had to have the money to buy an ad in the paper or a billboard or whatever. Now you can post on Facebook, post on Instagram. the better you are, the more people see it.
Yeah.
You can reach out to people. I don't need to. I mean, yes, I've worked with PR people, but I could also directly DM someone on Instagram and ask them to come on the show. I mean, I had Tiffany Thiessen on my show. I've been watching her on TV since I was 13 years old and had a crush on her just like every other dude. When I posted that, everyone's like, she was my first crush, right?
Yeah.
She was on my podcast, and that's because of the internet. I am talking to you you're in a foreign country right now, and we are
Yeah.
live here on the internet. It's a magical place. It's not all, terrible stuff. And
Right.
teaching our children are going to grow up in this environment. So what are the positive things? I think YouTube is a blessing and a curse. There's amazing stuff. There's garbage on there. You go down a rabbit hole of the worst stuff on earth.
Yeah.
But you can also learn how to do literally anything. Like if anything happens to my car or something breaks in my house, I'm doing video editing now. I downloaded DaVinci, which is a video editor. I don't know how to use it. And everything I want to do, it's just like go on YouTube. It's like DaVinci, how do you cut a video clip? Oh, I got that. And then you get the next thing. It's like, oh, I need to work on the audio. DaVinci, mono to stereo. And like someone has taken the time to record a video on that, and you can learn anything you want.
YouTube
It's just like,
University is a thing.
yeah, putting it into the right, you just have to find what you're looking for. Yes, you can go down the rabbit hole and watch people, dancing or doing stupid stuff, and, people on OnlyFans, like getting naked for money. Like there's that corner of the internet.
Yeah.
But you can meet amazing people. And I'm a self-professed introvert, which people don't always believe, but I totally am. And the internet was my jam. Like I was an early adopter. I got on in 1995 because I'm like, this is the place where I can find the people that are my tribe. Like I'm not into sports at all. So you grow up in a town where it's like everyone's into sports, and the cool stuff is like I'm listening like indie rock and super niche stuff. And it's like I didn't have a community of people who live near me who are into that. And in 95, when my friends in college introduced me to AOL and we got on the internet, and there was like specific chat rooms, like I can go in a chat room with people who are just interested in this band. Like this is my place. So I've been on the internet for a very long time, and the things that you can do, and it's amazing. So I'm trying to teach my kids that, it's like we want to limit screen time, but like also, yeah, I understand like you're into art. My daughter's into art and she wants to draw. It's like, you can go on YouTube and watch a tutorial on how to draw this anime thing. Sure. Go ahead.
Oh, all the time. Cause our kids spend way too much time on YouTube, kids. And Madison will come in. She's like, oh, she'll tell me a joke, or she's like, hey, here's this illusion that I just learned, or she'll go straight to the kitchen. Cause my daughter if she wants to go bake, I'm like, I don't care. You are safe in the kitchen. You go make whatever you want. You just clean up after yourself. I don't even have to be in there anymore. And I love that. She's like, oh man, I want to make blah, blah, blah. Awesome. Go knock yourself out. Let me, and then the kids we've been into Chopped lately. So watching some of the original episodes of Chopped. And so
stuff.
we've had Chopped competitions in the kitchen here. And unfortunately, I've been the judge for some of those. And I'm like,
it can get a little weird, I'm sure.
But they're like, you come up with the ingredients. So I give them the most random stuff. The other day, it was a dessert challenge. And I was like, I gave them tortillas, peanut butter, and a couple other things. I don't remember what the 5 ingredients were, but they were random, and it was a dessert challenge. My son made a taco with it, and nope. But but he was proud of it, and I'm like, even though it doesn't taste good, you put the work. He's 8, and he put the work in, and he tried really hard. And I'm like, okay, no. But then she made this tart out of tortilla chips, brown sugar, a few other things. I can't remember what it was. She made this like peanut butter tart. And I'm like, how did you come up with this idea? And she used mini angel food tin to make the tart. Super creative. And it wasn't that bad. I was like, wow.
Probably better than whatever you could have pulled together, right?
Amen. 100%. No debate. No debate about that. And because of the internet, because of TV, cooking, you're absolutely right. And the thing that I respect so much about you, Chris, is that you're allowing that to happen and you're encouraging it to happen in your house. And by doing what you do, you're showing the world as well. And yeah, tech, man, this is incredible that you're in Maryland, I'm in Guam, and we're having a conversation. And
Absolutely. This is crazy. You wouldn't have
it
even dreamed of this, you know?
no, not a chance. And going back when I did the first iteration of this, even 5 years ago, I had the opportunity to be and I this makes me feel like I'm patting my own back, and I'm not. It's just in talking about the internet is I had the opportunity I was invited to be a guest host um, for a show in England, that I met people in Ireland and I met people in South Africa. I was invited to guest host a show in Canada that then we interviewed a gentleman from somewhere in Europe. So it's like the main host is in Canada. I'm in Maryland, or I was in Ohio, and we're talking to a guy out of Cambridge.
So cool. Yeah.
Who would have thought
Yeah.
this
I
was going
mean,
to be a thing?
2 weeks ago, my guest was he's the national chef of Scotland. Like, that's amazing. Like, I wanted to talk to him because I don't know anything about Scottish food, right? And again, he had a PR agent and she sent me like a book because he wrote a book for Scotland, for the people of Scotland. But then he realized like as he like went around the world, people wanted to use this book, but they couldn't find the ingredients. So he basically took that book and rewrote it for North America. So like,
Wow.
he realized like, okay, this is stuff I can find in my home country, but if you're in the US, here's how I would do it. But it's like, I want to have you on the show. And I said for like selfish reasons, because I love learning. Like, I want to have you on and just pull those threads. And, who knows what time it was there when we talked. But for me, that was so cool. Like, he's sitting at his house in Scotland and we're talking about Scottish food and cooking and
That's
all of that.
amazing.
And that's what I love about this is it gives me the opportunity firsthand to talk to people about whatever I want. How cool.
Well, speaking of talking to amazing people,
Yeah.
how incredible was this?
So that's 2002. I met him twice on that tour. I remember that day because I was working. That's in Seattle. That's at a cooking store there, and I was working that day. I had already met him. This was when a cook. No, this might have been the second round of. No, this was a cook's tour. So Kitchen Confidential had come out. I met him on that tour in Seattle, and at the time, it was crazy. He was not a big deal. There was 30 people in the room, maybe, when he did the read for Kitchen Confidential and a book signing. Really cool. I got a signed first edition of that book.
Wow.
And then a cook's tour, was a show on the Food Network that I don't think a lot of people even watched at the time. And a book came out with that. And he was doing, a signing, and I was working. It was like a Saturday, which was a slow day, which is weird. That's a whole other thing. But I was working at a Jewish retirement community. So Saturday lunch was kind of slow because you're actually not allowed to eat until sundown. And I was just hanging out in my office. I'm like, Tony's down at this cooking store down at Pike Place Market. I bet I can be, I was working like 5 minutes from there. And I just like ran down to the store because I wanted to meet him again and have another book signed because I didn't get a photo. And man, I've had to do some photoshopping on this. This photo is taken with a 1 megapixel camera. I mean, we're talking 2002. I talk about being an early adopter. There's a price that comes along with that. Sometimes the
Yes.
tech is not good. And I would have done better to have used a disposable film camera. But my friend worked for HP and he got all these free things. And Derek gave me a bunch of cameras. And I had this 1 megapixel digital camera that I thought was amazing. And during that time, I met some awesome people and did some great things. And my photos are garbage. My wedding photos that I took with my camera were garbage because it's a 1 megapixel camera. So I've had to do a little photoshopping magic on there.
Looks good. That's amazing though. It's incredible the people that you've had the opportunity to meet.
Yeah. Yeah. When you take a step back and think about it, I've had an amazing life in so many respects, and not just meeting famous people, but life happens so fast. And I think you have to
Yeah.
slow down and think about like all the things that you've done and experienced. And I'm grateful for all of that.
So what is something that you look back on your life that you look at yourself and you go, "Wow, that
Yeah.
I that was pretty amazing."
I mean, I think any time that I talk in front of people or to people, like, I mean, I grew up as like a shy, nerdy kid who, in high school, I had like 5 or 6 friends. Like, I was not popular by any means. And even through college, like, I had a good solid group of friends, but I was the quietest person in the room. And I feel like it was that way till I was almost 40. And I remember, like, when I started my business and I joined the Chamber of Commerce, and the first time, I don't know if you remember your first time, but the first time you go to that place, if you're an introvert, it's like, first thing I'm gonna do, ooh, they have drinks here. I'm gonna go get a drink because I need to just like take that edge off because I have to go and just like, there's all these people having conversations and they all know each other. And you just have to like kind of do this like little shuffle into this group. And then you're there. It's like, oh, hey, how's it going? And you have to
Yep.
like talk to them and not
I
necessarily like elevator pitch your business, but just like talk to them. It's like, I don't know these
right.
people. I hate this. And now I love it. Now I'm like, I want to go to a room with a bunch of people I don't know and I want to talk to them, which is so weird. I love that stuff right now, but it took me like 40 years to get to that place.
You were not super comfortable the day I met you.
That's probably right.
And,
Yeah.
you know, um, but then again, you did it. You did it and you put yourself out there and you put yourself in an uncomfortable place to attain the thing that you wanted to accomplish.
Yeah. Have you ever heard of the book, The Art of Asking, or even the TED Talk about that by Amanda Palmer? It's
I've
amazing. It
heard of
changed
it.
it changed my life. She's a musician, and it basically came down to like she got to a place where she just started asking for what she wanted. And she's one of her notable accomplishments is being, at the time, she was the person who raised the most money on Patreon. Like, basically, she wanted to crowdfund her own album and tour and realized she just needed to ask the fans for this. And the whole
Wow.
premise is basically like nobody is going to give you anything without asking, and asking isn't really that scary. And at the end of the day, like, what is the worst that happens if someone says no?
Amen.
Yeah, you miss all the shots you don't take. Isn't that what the saying is? And for
Yep.
me, that was like the unlock. There was a culinary competition in the DC area. I went a number of years as a paid attendee. I got to know the organizer. It was called Koshan 555. I really love this thing. And every year I was paying to go, and I knew all the chefs and I knew the guy. And like, after reading that book, I just reached out to Brady via probably Instagram or Facebook or Twitter and said, "Hey, Brady, question, like, how do you get to be a judge? Because I've been to this thing 4 years in a row and I think I could judge." And like right away, he's like, "Of course you can judge. Like, here's the invite. The thing's
I
in
love
like
it.
2 months." And then every year he just sent me like an auto invite. But to the first time you send that email, it's like the imposter syndrome, like you talked about. Imposter
Yeah.
syndrome's real, unless you're like a super confident person, which was not me. So to reach out to someone that I knew of and respected and just like say like, "Hey, can I do this thing?" And then once that happened, you're like, "Oh, wow, is that how that works?" And then
That wasn't that hard.
that wasn't that hard. And then I was going to this conference, the Star Chefs conference in New York City every year. And again, I had been there for a number of years. I'd paid for it. I got to know everyone. And I just reached out to them and said, like, I do some writing. My website is essentially a blog. Like, could I come cover it? Yeah, we would love for you to cover it. Like, we'll pay for your admission and you can get a VIP pass to go anywhere and let us know like what you want to write about. And you can go to all the workshops and just, spit out 3 editorials for us. Cool. And then you get to go to all the after parties and hang out with these people. And then you're in the insiders club. And it's like, how did I get here? But it was just like having the confidence to say, like, I have these skills or this thing, and can
Right.
I do this? And it takes
Right.
a while to get there, I think.
Well, I struggle with having such good looking people on the show.
I do not look like that in real life. I was saying I kind of feel like Jim from The Office, but with swords and leather there. Yeah, I started to dabble into the AI art thing. That was a Mid-Journey project or something like that, which turned out really cool. I got some pretty cool avatars of kind of me in
Yeah.
faux fantasy settings. Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know.
The
My wife hates like facial hair, so I don't think I'll ever grow that.
Well, now you can, via the picture, you have
Yeah.
it.
Yes.
And then, of course,
I'm a big Star
this
Wars
is
geek.
real.
Yeah, I think that was at the Baltimore Science Center, like the kids science center. They, for some reason, maybe it was in May and it was for like May the 5th or something, but they had the giant Han Solo and carbonite thing. And you just stood behind it and put your head through and there
I
you
love it.
go. I mean, who wouldn't want a picture like that?
So how geeky are you, Chris? Honestly.
I mean, I'd say moderately geeky. The weird thing about the internet is like you realize you are not a geek at all in the grand scheme of things. Like when I was in high school, I was the Star Wars guy, right? Like I had every figure ever made from like, 1977 to like 1999 or something. And I thought I was huge. And now it's like, you see these people and they know everything about like I thought I knew a lot. And you're like, wow, I am not even in the top 200 of
Mm-mm.
geeks on this stuff, because we're now at a global level. And of course, all
Yeah.
the knowledge is on the internet.
Yeah.
But I think in the grand scheme of geeky things, I do okay.
It's funny. I I like to think of myself as a little bit of a Star Wars geek. Not huge, but I can hold my own for the most part in a conversation. Not in a debate, but in a conversation. And I'm with you. It's like, yeah, la 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 la. And then, something comes across Facebook or TikTok or whatever it is. And same thing. I'm like, I'm gonna go sit in the corner now because
Yeah. I used to
apparently
be
I
able to,
don't know
I
anything.
could name all the alien species back when I was in high school and all this stuff. And, yeah, but you're like, oh, wow. Like people have all these theories about things. They watch a show and in half an hour, there's a YouTube breakdown of the episode with all the Easter eggs. And you're like, because I like a lot of
Wow.
things. Like I am a geek across many things, and that could be,
Yeah.
it's Star Wars, it's Marvel, it's like indie music, it's cooking. So I have a lot of these things. So I'm not just like one thing that I really dive deep into. I have a lot of nerd likes out there.
So what's your next nerd like you want to get into?
You know what I want to do a podcast that is not talking about food and cooking. I love I'm a big podcast listener and I'm listening to them all the time. And I just love my thing right now is listening to Rick Rubin's podcast, Tetragrammaton. Rick Rubin was like the music producer back in the day, worked with the
Yep.
Beastie Boys and all these
Yep.
people and
I'm
back in the
I'm a
day.
big
And
fan.
but he does these like 3 to 3.5 hour podcasts. And I love the structure of it. I love everything. I love his intro music. I love the way he does his ads. He doesn't do an intro. Like basically you come into it like in the middle of a conversation. There's no intro because I mean, he has big guests, but it's like he has Tom Hanks on. And it's just like
Yeah.
they're just like two guys talking. And it comes in the middle. And then you're like, what were they talking about? It's super interesting. And we came in like mid-sentence. I want to know what I missed. And you can just listen to them for 3 hours talking. I love creativity. I love collaboration. And in my head, I have a podcast about both of those things, like where people find creative inspiration, their thoughts on collaboration. So people have done cool projects with other people. It could be in the food world, but I don't want to limit myself. And now, as I have connections to people in public relations who represent people who are not just chefs, I want to be able to say, I also am working on this project. And what I think I'm going to do is it's going to start to be part of my conversations and hold that off. So I'm going to talk to you, Dale, for, an hour, but 45 minutes are going to be Chefs Without Restaurants. And then the last 15 minutes are going to be this other thing. And I'm going to
I like
table it
it.
for a while and then just edit it. So it's got to be timeless because it's not you talking about a book that's coming out next month or
Right.
whatever, but I want to talk to you about creativity, your creative process, your inspiration, cool collabs. And I think I'm going to start doing that with my guests and then hold that off and
Ooh,
then
I
see
like
what
it.
that looks like. And then that could be a limited run, but use that to lure in other people and say, this is what the show is going to sound like, but I really want to have, David Fincher on or Quentin Tarantino or, Trent Reznor from Nine Inch Nails. These are big names and I have big aspirations there. But the idea is to have this kind of Rick Rubin podcast where I talk to people about creativity and inspiration and collaboration.
I love it.
That's not food. That's something that I want to get into because it's just like, again, the people who I want to talk to
Yeah. I love
selfishly.
that, man. I love that.
Yeah, I mean, I love photography. I would love to be a concert photographer. I love live music. I'm just coming off of having gone to 6 shows in 2.5 weeks, which is pretty hard. In fact, my son and I drove to Boston just to see Rancid. It's, a punk band from the late
Yep.
90s, but my son started listening to them because I listen to them. And they only played one show in the whole US, one headlining show. And it was at 2 nights at the House of Blues in Boston. And I promised my
Nice.
son if they hit the East Coast, we'd go. So we hopped in the car and drove from Maryland up to Boston to go to the show. But, I go to these shows, and again, with the quality of photo and video you can get just out of a phone, I'm taking some pretty cool stuff. And a lot of bands have used photos I've taken and saved them and shared them through their social media. And I would love to do that. So it's like, is that a gateway point that then I can talk to these people and say, hey, I'm the guy who took this photo. Could we like hop on a Zoom? Well, I don't use Zoom anymore, but whatever, a video call for, and it could be a shorter conversation because I don't necessarily want to get into your backstory. Like if you're a musician, you've probably been in Rolling Stone and on MTV. I want to dive a little deeper. So like, what are the things we could talk about?
Right.
And we could get this done in, maybe 15, 20 minutes, or maybe it's 3 hours like Rick Rubin,
Right.
I don't know. I'm just spitballing here.
So speaking of chef photographers, you have a fellow chef there in your community that used to be a NASCAR photographer,
Mm.
Dave Rolls.
I know of Dave Rolls. I don't know that I have even met Dave in person, but he's a name that comes up in the
Yeah.
chef community here. I didn't know anything about that with the NASCAR photography.
Yeah. Yeah. So he used to do the entire NASCAR circuit.
Really
Yeah.
interesting.
And he's done a bunch of concerts and a bunch of stuff like that. He's a cool cat. You really, of course, I love him. He's a great guy. I think you guys would, and he's super, super down to earth.
Yeah, we were just
Um,
in, there's the Everything Frederick Facebook group, and last week someone was looking for someone to do a cooking thing, and Dave's name came up a number of times in that
yeah.
thread, as the same 3 or 4 people always have their name tossed out there, myself included.
Yeah.
But I don't
When you're
think I've
good,
ever
you're
met
good.
Dave. Yeah,
You
I
know?
try.
Okay. So, couple things. When you look back on your life, what piece of advice would you give your 18-year-old self? Seems cliche, but it's something that now that you've had some success and you've had a couple more years under your belt and you have kids, what would that
Yeah,
be?
it's take those risks, move fast, move often.
Mm,
I I had a good job before I started my business, but I was there 10 years, and it was probably at least 5 years too long, and there's whole stability issues, right? Like I was ready to maybe start my business earlier. And then, my wife and I had twins, and there is a financial thing where it's like, okay, my wife's not going to work for a couple of years. And, I should probably have a job with some stability and money and
mhm.
benefits and all that. But definitely at 18, I should have been taking those risks. At 25, I should have been taking those risks. The internet was around, there were those opportunities. But, I grew up in a conservative household. My dad was very much like authoritarian, listen to your boss, do what you're told, keep your head down, kind
Mhm.
of people, which is funny because he ultimately hated his job and walked off the job on his last day. Like he walked out and quit because he had had enough. My parents have both passed away, and they never got to either see me having my kids or my business or any of that stuff. So it'd be
I'm
interesting to have those
sorry.
conversations these days. But just, yeah, I mean, you're young, and that's why I try and instill that in my kids these days. Just today we're talking about school and stuff, and my wife and I are not grade focused. We're very much like learning is important, and learning opportunities are important. And, and that's why I tell people, like in culinary school, like I focus really hard on some things, but I focus more on grades and not learning. Like I went to culinary school and I got out 4 years later and I didn't know how to break down a fish, because when you're in culinary school, you work in groups of 4, and I was afraid of fish and I didn't know how to do it. And I knew, like,
Mm,
if I break down this chicken, I'm going to get an A and know how to do it. But if I
got it.
try that salmon, I'm going to screw it up and not do as well. But then I get out of college and $100,000 later and I still don't know how to break down a fish. Like that's not okay. And then 0 people ever have asked to see a transcript of my grades from my school or even a diploma proving that I went there. I could have gone anywhere. Nobody ever
Yeah.
asked. So like for me, the journey is education, not, grades per se. So like don't focus on that. Always focus on learning and move quickly. Learn as much as you can, as quickly as you can. And that might mean jumping jobs.
Right. And with that, it is it okay to fail?
Oh, that's where you learn all the stuff, right? Like I remember all that, and going back to school, like I remember the things that I screwed up on, the things that I didn't do well are the things
Right.
I remember to this day, not the things that I did do well, the things that I didn't do well and someone had to show me. Like we had a storeroom class where you had to identify 100 products. I don't remember what any of them were except horseradish, because horseradish was the one I missed, and I remember that.
Right.
As long as you're not like a heart surgeon and you're failing and killed someone, like most of the decisions out there aren't that important. And in
Right.
the grand scheme of things, like, and I think
And
as a parent, you have to let your kids fail as well. And I think there's too much helicopter parenting and not getting our kids ready for the real world. And then they're going to make the big mistakes when there are real stakes.
amen. 100%. My daughter, bless her heart, is just like her mama. She has a huge brain. She thankfully got her mom's brains and not
You
mine.
do okay. Come on.
I do okay. I do okay. But, my wife now has more letters behind her name than in her name, kind of a deal. So, but Madison, she she's better now, but there was a period, and even now we still have to have this conversation from time to time of in school, in swim team, in whatever we're doing. Well, what if I don't do it right? What if I fail? What if I, okay, you fail. It's okay. As long as you fail forward and we're learning from it and processing it, then it's, my dad had a saying. He's like, as long as you learn from your failure, it's no longer a bad thing. It's a learning experience. And that's exactly it.
Yeah.
I have failed way more in my life than I've ever succeeded. And that's just going to help down the road. So yes, I agree with you, man. And as a soccer coach, I've been coaching now 6 years, 7 years, 6 years, something like that. And it's all rec. It's not high level coaching, but you're talking about helicopter parents, and you talk about kids that just last night, I'll bring this into just last night. I really challenged my U13 players, my daughter's team. And there's some kids on there that have been playing 6, 8 years. There's also some kids that this is the first time they've ever touched a soccer ball. And, the sidebar a little bit, the ones that have been on and been around soccer for a long time, they're like, well, I know. And so it's
Yeah.
easy to get that arrogance when you're around people that don't know their nose from a hole in the wall. But now we've been doing it a little over a month. And I'm like, okay, now it's time to really challenge you. And last night, I really challenged them. I had them do skill work that they've never done before. Even the kids that have been doing it for 6, 8 years, they've never done this skill work before. And the frustration on their face was everything. And I am absolutely okay with them being frustrated and discouraged and demoralized. And as a coach, I am absolutely, and as a parent too, I challenge my own kids to the point of failure. As long as you don't live in that emotion, whatever it is, and we learn and we move forward, then we're winning.
But as an adult, when was the last time you did that? I think that's the thing, is we hit this age
Mm,
where we stop doing those things where it's just like, it's everyday life. I've got a job. I get up, I go to my job 5 days a week. I'm with the
mm.
family, whatever. I've talked about this a lot. Like I started doing karate with my son 2 years ago now, which is a scary thing. I say I was 6'4". I was 285 pounds. I had a bad back and neck, not really flexible. And I joined an all ages karate, at the Y, where I
Wow.
was the only adult out there with a bunch of 9-year-olds. humbling because you're also out there in front of all these parents. So they're all sitting in their chairs watching their children. And here is this 6'4" gigantic man out there punching or punching at their children. And it's humbling, right? Like you have to look like a fool. And I've grown so much in the 2 years of doing it. We had karate tonight. My son and I were still doing it. And it's about the journey, because with the kids, it can be frustrating if you don't belt up fast enough. I don't want anything given to me. My
Yeah.
son will say, "When do you think you're going to get your belt?" And I'll say, "Sensei will know when I'm ready."
Yeah.
I've only been doing this 2 years. The expectation isn't that every class I'm going to get the next belt. I will get that when I've done everything to completion and satisfaction. And if I do this for 5 more years and I don't get my next belt, I'm okay with that. But like,
Yeah.
when was the last time as an adult you tried something new?
Amen.
Picked up a guitar or picked up that camera or whatever. I don't think enough adults are out there trying new things. And it doesn't have to be your life. It doesn't have to be a big commitment, but like, what are you doing for self-growth?
Yeah. Buddy, that right there, that question right there is, you and I can talk for the next hour just on that alone, because I agree with you. And I've fallen in those times of life 100% where I wasn't growing and I wasn't learning, and I didn't do anything. And I did something about a year and a half ago that I felt super sheepish about. And I was like, oh my gosh, really? What am I doing? Why am I doing this? And it turned out to be super fun and
What was
challenging.
that?
My buddy handed me a deck of Magic the Gathering cards.
Okay. Had you ever done it before?
Nope. Nope. Never played Magic. My son and I got into Pokemon a little bit, and that was fun. That was me being a dad trying to be supportive of my kid who is super into Pokemon. So we
Sure.
picked up,
That's how those things start, right?
yeah. And so we got into it. But then my neighbor, he's like, man, I love playing this. And have you ever heard of it? I was like, yeah, I've heard of it, but I'm
Yeah.
not going to play that,
Right. That's how
you
I would
know?
feel probably.
And got into it, and holy geez, that's hard. It took me a year, and I still don't know it, but it took me a year of getting my teeth kicked in and my ass handed to me every single game before I finally figured it out. Like my buddy Ridge, he would be like, I think we're done playing. I'm like, nope. He's like, you've lost every game. I'm like, I don't care. Nope, we're going to play it again because I'm not
Bring it
figuring
on.
this out
Bring
yet.
it on.
And he was like, no, I'm done. He's like, I'm embarrassed for you. Let's stop. But yes, I agree with you, man. I truly believe not enough of us as adults do something new and do something
Or
challenging.
just even take the time for themselves. I think it's really hard. It's
Yeah.
easy to just say, listen, I've got especially if you have a business. It's like, I've got a job or I've got a business. We've got the kids. We've got this thing. Like, I don't know. Should I be really taking an hour a week to do this, or 2 hours
Right.
a week to do this? And then you're just like, I don't want to be 80 and be like, oh, wow, I spent my whole life just like working and taking care of my kids. Like, I think for your own mental well-being, you need to find that thing. Again, like, it's not necessarily interactive, but for me, that's become like music and going to concerts. And it's one of those things that I just like, I feel alive in a way that I don't feel any other way when I go to a
I love
show.
it.
And it's one of those things I love to do solitary. Like, I love my family and stuff, but I want to go by myself. Like, I don't want to feel like I'm looking after it. Like, my wife she can't hang. She doesn't like being up late. I took her to a show last week with the kids, and everyone was like tired and wanting to go before the encore, which is fine because
Yeah.
I had seen them the week before because I knew they were going to be like that. So, um, I just love that. And like, that's that selfish thing that I do for myself, where it's like, I schedule it in where it's like, I'm going to go into DC and go to a show and just like get in the crowd with people and not have to worry about anyone else. And it's just me having a good time
I love
and
it.
making new friends and that kind of stuff. And I don't think enough people, it doesn't have to be all the time, but whether you're just
Right.
going out with friends, once a week, once a month, finding something new, reading a book, taking the time, like, you got
Yeah.
to eke out that time. Otherwise, what are we doing here?
Amen. Amen. And with that, sir, I think that's the wisdom right there of Chris
Got nothing else
Spear.
for you.
Yeah. Oh no, there's a plethora of more from you, sir. And so, Chris, with that, man, I am so thankful that you're willing to take an hour of your precious time in everything that you're doing and
Yeah. I'm
share
also a
with
chef
me.
too. How about that?
Yeah. Yeah. On top of it
There's
all.
like so,
So,
so many other things, right?
so you are, to brag on you, and even though you and I haven't stayed talking directly, I brag on you still all the time. I mean,
Oh, thank
I
you.
I talk to people and I was like, yeah, this dude Chris, man, I met him here and he's doing this and he's doing that, and especially when media podcasting comes up, I'm like, yeah, this dude, he's doing it. He didn't talk about it, he's doing it, and I use you as that example of taking what you love to do and transferring that into something else that you've learned that you really love to do as well.
Yeah.
And you are an inspiration, and you inspire me all the time. And I truly appreciate that we're still able after years to jump on here and be like, what's up, brah?
And many miles away. I don't even know how many
Oh,
miles it is to Guam, but
jeez. I
it's
don't
quite a
know,
few.
7,000 something. I
A
don't know.
lot of miles, dude.
So, because Guam, just so you know, we're just east of the Philippines.
Yeah. That's a good long trip.
Yeah. Yeah. So, buddy, I appreciate it. I'm sure you're ready to hit the sack because it's super late for you.
We're getting on there. What time is it there right now where you are?
It is 12:40 p.m. on Tuesday.
Woo. Yeah. We rolling up here on 11 p.m. here, and I had my karate tonight and everything. So
Yeah.
yeah, I'm ready to call it a night.
All
No,
right,
but I had a
brother.
great time. I had a great time. Thanks so much for having me on.
Man, I appreciate you, and hang out for just 1 second. But
Yeah.
everyone else, this is what we're doing. And I appreciate Chris, and I appreciate you guys. And I need to be better about doing the hit the like button and do all the subscriptions and all that jazz. I need to get better at the ask. Chris has already talked about the ask. I need to get better at it.
Like, follow, subscribe.
There it is. Guys, rock out your day, hug somebody, squish